Why do some people never learn that silence can be the loudest warning they'll ever hear? The sodium lights hummed their dying song over Route 19A, 22 miles from Naval Amphibious Base Little Creek, 13 from the civilian motel strip, and exactly nowhere anyone wanted to be at 10:37 on a Tuesday night. The gas station sat there like a tired prayer, two overhead lamps blinking their last filaments, a faded roadside stop where good people hurried and bad people lingered. Inside, Ken the clerk hunched behind bulletproof glass, scrolling a cracked phone screen with instant noodles wedged under his elbow. The coffee machine burbled. A neon beer sign flickered red against the front window. And somewhere in the back, a refrigerator compressor kicked on with a metallic wheeze that said it had maybe 6 months left before permanent failure. She stepped inside without a word. Civilian windbreakers zipped to the collar, black tactical pants that had seen 1,000 miles of hard use, scuffed Salomon boots with laces double-knotted and tucked, a navy ball cap low over her forehead, no logo, no unit identifier, just fabric faded to the color of old smoke. No jewelry except the black rubber wristband half-tucked beneath her sleeve. The kind people wear when they've made promises they can't afford to break. She moved with the quiet decisiveness of someone used to knowing which way the door opened and where the exits were before stepping through them. Her eyes tracked left, scanned the counter, then right toward the narrow snack aisle. All of it done in the time it took for the door to swing shut behind her. The bell above the frame dinged once. It sounded tired. She walked past the counter without looking at Ken, scanned the small snack aisle with a single glance that cataloged every item in shadow, then angled toward the back cooler for a bottle of water. Not soda, not anything with sugar or flavor or empty calories, just hydration. Always hydration. Her hand didn't pause on the glass handle. No second thoughts. She made her choices like someone whose decisions had once been timed in fractions of seconds and measured in consequences she couldn't undo. Outside, two men leaned against a silver Ford with aftermarket rims and a cracked rear bumper held together by duct tape and misplaced confidence. One smoked. The other watched the store's reflection in the window glass, tracking movement inside like a dog watching a fence line. He shifted a little when she walked in, weight moving from his left foot to his right, but he didn't move toward the door. Neither did their engine, still running. Exhaust curling into the cold October air, in lazy spirals that caught the yellow glow of the overhead lights. She clocked them once on her way in, just enough to note the distance between the door and the car, the angle of their stance, the fact that neither wore a jacket heavy enough for the temperature, which meant they weren't planning to be outside long. Then she looked away like she hadn't seen them at all. There were two other customers inside. A man in a grease-stained work shirt buying scratchers near the counter, thumbing through the options with the slow deliberation of someone trying to solve a problem that couldn't be solved with paper and ink. And a woman hunched near the refrigerated burritos, reading nutrition labels like they might contain answers to questions she hadn't asked yet. Neither looked up, neither mattered. The woman in the windbreaker approached the register, placed the bottle down with the label facing forward and waited. Ken looked up, blinked once, his face caught somewhere between recognition and the vague discomfort of knowing he'd seen her before but couldn't place where. She nodded. He rang it up. $3.25. She handed over exact change. Didn't say a word. Didn't smile. Didn't make the small talk people use to fill silence when they're uncomfortable with stillness. The bell dinged again. This time it wasn't her. The two men had come inside, one at a time, slow, not loud, not rowdy, just lingering in a way that changed the air pressure in the room. The one who'd been smoking flicked the butt onto the concrete just before the door shut. The other kept his hands in his jacket pockets, fingers working something that clinked faintly with the sound of metal on metal. They didn't grab anything, didn't walk toward the fridges or the snack aisle, just waited near the entrance like they were deciding whether to stay or leave, except their eyes said they'd already decided. Ken straightened slightly behind the glass. The man buying scratchers glanced up, then down, then quietly stepped away toward the far end of the counter. The woman near the burritos froze mid-reach, her hand still extended toward a package she no longer wanted. The woman in the windbreaker turned to leave, bottle in hand, but one of them moved in sync with her, just enough to make the space near the door smaller, his shoulder angling into her exit line without ever fully blocking it. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Late night, huh?" She didn't answer, didn't need to. Her posture already had. The taller of the two stepped in first. Denim jacket, frayed cuffs, torn collar like he'd yanked the tag off years ago and never looked back. Close-shaved head. Crow's feet that didn't come from smiling. And a sideways lean that said this wasn't his first time testing boundaries in a space with fluorescent lights and a tired cashier who wouldn't risk his minimum wage job to intervene. His name was Derek Vance, though she didn't know that yet. And his hands were the hands of someone who'd learned early that size and proximity were often enough to win before a fight even started. The second one was wirier, narrow-faced, hoodie unzipped over a shirt that hadn't seen detergent in a week, hands that stayed in his pockets, not out of cold but out of calculation. His name was Ray Dawson, and his eyes moved with the quick darting energy of someone who'd spent too much time looking over his shoulder and not enough time figuring out what he was running from. Both men moved like they had time to waste, and too much energy for their own good. The woman in the windbreaker didn't step back, didn't freeze. She just paused at the shoulder angle, the one between a clean exit and a blocked one, then shifted a single foot to the side. Her weight rested slightly back, balanced on the balls of her feet. Her body turned just enough to keep both men visible in her peripheral vision without squaring up to either. The bottle stayed in her left hand. Her right hand hung loose at her side, fingers relaxed, thumb hooked casually near her belt line. The taller one caught it, smirked. "You ex-military or something?" She didn't reply, didn't need to. He turned to his buddy. "Told you, got that look." "Which look?" "The don't talk to me unless it's life or death look." The second man chuckled. Could be undercover or just constipated. They both laughed. It wasn't loud. It was performative, meant to test boundaries, to see if she'd flinch or smile or give them anything they could use to justify stepping closer. She gave them nothing. Just stood there, still, centered, absolutely certain. And that's when Derek's smile started to fade. Because there's a difference between someone who won't fight and someone who doesn't need to. And the longer she stood there saying nothing, the clearer that difference became. But Derek had pride, and pride makes men stupid. "Come on now," he said, stepping half a foot closer. "We're just being friendly." "Friendly," Ray echoed, his hands still in his pockets. She didn't move, didn't blink, just watched them the way you watch a stove you know is hot, aware, alert, but not afraid. Derek's jaw tightened. He didn't like being ignored, didn't like the way she stood there like he didn't matter, like he was background noise in a life that had seen real threats and real violence and real consequences. "You deaf or something?" Still nothing. And that's when Ray pulled his hands from his pockets. The gun came out casual, a Glock 19, standard issue for people who thought firepower equaled power. He didn't point it at her immediately, just held it low, visible, a suggestion more than a threat. "Maybe she'll talk now," Ray said. Ken ducked lower behind the glass. The man with the scratchers pressed himself against the far wall. The woman by the burritos covered her mouth with both hands. And the woman in the windbreaker, she didn't even look at the gun. She looked at Ray, right in the eyes, calm, measured, like she was reading a weather report. Derek grinned now, confidence returning. "Yeah, see, all that tough guy act disappears real quick when the stakes change." Ray stepped forward, raised the gun slightly. Not aiming yet, just making sure she saw it, understood it, felt the weight of what it meant. "So here's how this works," Derek said. "You're gonna give us your wallet, your phone, whatever else you got. And then you're gonna walk out that door and forget you ever saw us. Sound good?" She tilted her head slightly, not in agreement, in consideration, like she was deciding whether this moment was worth her energy. And then she spoke, for the first time, her voice low, even the kind of calm that comes from people who have faced down worse than a gas station robbery and lived to catalog the mistakes others made. "You're going to want to put that down." Ray blinked. "What?" "The gun, put it down. Walk away, both of you." Derek laughed, loud this time, genuine shock mixed with disbelief. "Did she just tell us to walk away?" "I think she did," Ray said, his grin widening. "Lady, I don't think you understand what's happening here." "I understand perfectly," she said. "You're making a choice you're going to regret in about 30 seconds." Silence stretched. The refrigerator compressor wheezed. The neon sign flickered. And somewhere outside, a semi rumbled past on Route 19A, its engine fatting into the distance like the last chance they had to make a different decision. Derek stepped closer. "Any last words?" She looked at him, not the gun, him, right into his eyes, and what he saw there wasn't fear. It was calculation. It was certainty. It was 13 years of close-quarters combat and 6 deployments and the kind of experience that turned violence from a threat into a guarantee. But he didn't know that yet. So he pressed the Glock to her chin. "I said, any last words? What goes through your mind when you realize you've made the worst mistake of your life?" The metal was cold against her skin. Firm. Steady. Ray's hand didn't shake. He had that much confidence at least. But confidence without competence is just noise before the silence. And she'd learned a long time ago that the loudest people were rarely the most dangerous ones. She didn't scream. Didn't beg. Didn't even flinch when the Glock touched her chin. Because when a Navy SEAL has spent 13 years disarming threats in 8 different countries, it doesn't matter who speaks first. It matters who ends it. Her eyes stayed locked on Ray's, not the gun. Him, always the person. Because weapons don't kill people, bad decisions do. And she could see his decision forming before he even knew he'd made it. His grip was wrong. 3 fingers on the handle, thumb resting too high, index finger outside the trigger guard like he was afraid of accidental discharge. Amateur. The kind of hold that looks intimidating on TV but falls apart under pressure. His stance was worse. Weight forward on his toes, left foot planted, right foot trailing like an anchor he didn't know he was dragging. She'd already counted his mistakes, already calculated the distance, already picked the exact second his balance would shift and the exact angle his wrist would break when she moved. Because that's what 13 years does to you. It turns moments like this into math problems. Clean, simple, solvable. Derek stood 3 feet behind Ray, arms crossed, watching with the smug satisfaction of someone who thought this was already over. He didn't see her left foot shift half an inch backward. Didn't notice her shoulders drop slightly, weight settling into her hips. Didn't catch the way her breathing slowed. 4 seconds in, hold, 6 seconds out. The pattern they drilled into her at Coronado until it became automatic under stress. "I'm waiting," Ray said, pressing the barrel harder against her chin. "Last words." She let the silence stretch. Let him think he'd won. Let his confidence grow just a little more, because overconfidence creates openings and openings create opportunities and opportunities are what you exploit when the other person thinks they're in control. Then she spoke, quiet, even, the kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly what happens next. "You're going to want to step back." Ray blinked. "What?" "Step back, put the gun down, walk out, last chance." Derek laughed behind him. "She's bluffing." "No," she said, still looking at Ray. "I'm giving you an option. You just don't recognize it yet." Ray's jaw tightened. His finger moved closer to the trigger guard, not inside it but closer. And that's when she knew he'd already decided. Not to shoot, but to escalate, to prove he wasn't afraid, to show Derek and Ken and everyone watching that he was the one in control. Men like Ray always made the same mistake. They thought violence was about dominance, but she'd learned something different in Kandahar and Ramadi and 6 other cities whose names she couldn't speak. Violence wasn't about dominance. It was about commitment, and the person who committed first, committed hardest, usually walked away. Last words, Ray repeated, his voice harder now, trying to sound certain. She didn't answer, because last words were for people who needed them, and she'd stopped needing them the day she earned her trident. What happened next took 2 seconds, maybe less, but time moves differently when your training kicks in, when muscle memory overrides conscious thought, when 13 years of repetitions collapse into a single fluid motion that doesn't feel like violence, it feels like breathing. Her right hand moved first, not toward the gun, toward his wrist. Palm strike angled upward, catching the underside of his forearm just above the joint where leverage breaks and control disappears. His wrist bent backward. The gun tilted up, and in the half-second his brain tried to process what was happening. Her left hand came across in a tight arc, fingers wrapping around the slide, thumb hooking behind the barrel. She twisted, hard, clockwise, using his forward weight against him. The Glock rotated in his grip. His finger, still outside the trigger guard, caught on the edge of the frame. She felt the resistance, adjusted, pulled harder, and then it was in her hands and he was stumbling backward off balance, his face shifting from confidence to confusion to the first pale flicker of fear. 2 seconds, maybe less. Derek moved, finally, too late. His hand went to his waistband, reaching for whatever he had tucked back there. But she'd already stepped left, putting Ray's body between them, the Glock now in her right hand, finger along the frame. Not in the trigger guard, not yet, because you don't escalate unless you have to, and she didn't have to. Not yet. Don't, she said, one word, quiet, certain. Derek froze, his hand halfway to his back, his eyes wide, because he just watched his friend get disarmed in the time it took to blink, and now he was looking at a woman holding a gun with the kind of casual competence that said she'd held a lot of guns before and known exactly what to do with them. Ray stumbled against the snack aisle, one hand clutching his wrist where her palm strike had landed. What the? Sit down, she said, not loud, not angry, just clear. He sat on the floor, back against the chip rack, his face pale, his wrist already swelling. Derek's hand slowly moved away from his waistband, up, palms forward, the universal sign of I'm done. Both of you, she said, on the floor, hands behind your head. They did, because what else were they going to do? The math had shifted, the variables had changed, and the equation that 2 minutes ago had them in control now had them sitting on dirty linoleum in a gas station that smelled like stale coffee and regret. She stood there, gun in one hand, bottle of water in the other, and for the first time since they'd walked in she let herself feel it, not relief, not satisfaction, just the quiet certainty that she'd made the right choice, that she'd given them chances, that she'd warned them. And they'd chosen not to listen. Ken's voice came shaky from behind the glass. Should I call the cops? Yes, she said, still watching Derek and Ray. Tell them you have 2 suspects in an attempted armed robbery. Tell them one of them is injured. Tell them the situation is secure. Ken fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so hard he almost dropped it twice. The man with the scratchers stayed pressed against the wall, eyes wide, mouth open like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. The woman by the burritos had both hands still covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face, not from fear anymore, but from something else. Relief maybe, or just the overwhelming realization that violence had appeared and disappeared in the span of 2 seconds and she was still standing. Derek spoke, his voice tight. Who the hell are you? She didn't answer, because it didn't matter, because in 2 minutes the deputies would arrive and they'd find out soon enough, because her name and her rank and her service record were all part of a life she'd left behind 18 months ago when the paperwork cleared, and the uniform came off and she'd walked out of Dam Neck with the quiet understanding that some things don't end just because you retire. But there was something else, something Ray and Derek didn't know yet, something that would make the next few hours very interesting for all of them. Because this wasn't just a robbery, and she wasn't just a retired SEAL who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This was something bigger, something that had started 3 weeks ago when a name appeared on a list. Her name. And a plan was set in motion by people who thought they knew how to hunt operators, people who thought they could target the ones who'd taken off the uniform and disappeared into civilian life. People who'd made the same mistake Ray and Derek just made. They'd underestimated silence, and what it meant when it came from someone who didn't need to speak to be heard. But she couldn't tell them that. Not yet. Not until the deputies arrived and made the arrests and someone higher up the chain made a phone call that would turn a gas station robbery into a federal investigation. So she just stood there, gun in one hand, watcher in the other, and waited. Because patience was part of the training too, and some lessons you didn't forget just because you retired. Have you ever watched someone's entire world collapse in the space between a question and an answer? The sirens came fast. 3 patrol cars, light bars strobing blue and red across the gas station parking lot, turning the tired sodium lights into something that looked almost urgent. The deputies moved with controlled precision, hands near weapons, eyes scanning, voices clipped and professional. They'd gotten the call. Attempted armed robbery. Suspects on scene. Situation secure. But nothing prepared them for what they found when they stepped inside. 2 men on the floor, hands behind their heads, one clutching his wrist, both pale, both quiet, and standing between them and the door, a woman in a windbreaker holding a Glock 19 pointed at the ground with her finger along the frame and a bottle of water in her other hand like she just stopped by for a drink. The first deputy through the door was Marcus Webb, 15 years on the job, 3 commendations, and the kind of situational awareness that came from too many domestics gone wrong and too many traffic stops that weren't. His hand went to his holster. "Ma'am, I need you to put the weapon down." Slowly. She didn't argue, didn't explain, just bent at the knees, placed the Glock on the floor and stepped back 3 paces, hands visible, non-threatening. The way someone moves when they understand protocol and don't need to be told twice. Webb approached, secured the weapon, cleared the chamber, checked the mag. 15 rounds, 1 in the pipe when she disarmed Ray. He looked at her, then at Derek and Ray, then back at her. "You want to tell me what happened here?" "They tried to rob the store," she said, simple, direct. "I stopped them." "With their own gun?" "Yes." Derek spoke up from the floor, his voice tight with something between anger and humiliation. "She assaulted us. We were just talking and she pulled a gun on her," Ken interrupted from behind the glass, his voice steadier now that backup had arrived. "The skinny one. He pulled it, put it to her face. She took it from him." Webb's eyes narrowed. He looked at Ray. "That true?" Ray didn't answer, just stared at the floor. The second deputy, Angela Reeves, stepped forward, crouched next to Ray. "You're under arrest for attempted armed robbery and assault with a deadly weapon." She cuffed him, read his rights, then moved to Derek. Same process, same rights. Both men quiet now, the fight gone out of them. Webb turned back to the woman in the windbreaker. "I'm going to need a statement. You got ID?" She nodded, reached slowly into her pocket, pulled out a wallet. Civilian driver's license. Virginia. Address in Virginia Beach. Name, Evelyn Thorne. Webb looked at it, looked at her, something clicked. "Wait, Evelyn Thorne." She didn't answer, didn't need to. His face changed, recognition mixed with something close to disbelief. "Your Commander Thorne." "Was," she said quietly. "Retired 18 months ago." Webb straightened. His posture shifted, not to attention, but to the respectful awareness of someone who knew what that title meant, what that rank represented, what kind of training and service and sacrifice stood behind it. SEAL Team 6. DVGRU, she corrected. Same thing. Reeves looked up from where she was securing Derek. Her eyes widened. Wait, Navy SEAL, you're a Navy SEAL. Was, Evelyn repeated, not anymore. But Webb was already putting the pieces together. The disarm, the control, the way she'd stood there holding a gun like it was an extension of her hand, the calm, the certainty, all of it made sense now. Ma'am, he said, and there was genuine respect in his voice. I need to ask, did he actually put the weapon to your face? Yes, under my chin, asked for last words. Reeves whistled low, and you disarmed him. Standard weapon retention protocol. He had poor grip, poor stance. I gave him multiple chances to walk away. How many chances? Webb asked. 3. He chose escalation each time. Derek spoke from the floor, his voice bitter. How were we supposed to know she was some kind of special ops? You weren't, Evelyn said, cutting him off. You were supposed to not pull a gun on someone at a gas station. That was the first clue. Webb almost smiled, almost, but professionalism held. I'm going to need you to come to the station, give a full statement, walk us through what happened. Understood. You injured at all? No. He is, Webb said, nodding toward Ray. That wrist is probably fractured. Probably, Evelyn agreed. Palm strike to the joint, standard disarm, nothing excessive. Reeves shook her head, still processing. Lady, you just disarmed an armed suspect and neutralized a threat at a gas station robbery like you were picking up milk. Water, Evelyn corrected, holding up the bottle. I don't drink milk. This time Webb did smile. Right, water, of course. The next hour passed in the controlled chaos of police procedure. Evidence photos, witness statements. Ken gave his account, stuttering at first, then more confident as Reeves walked him through it. The man with the scratchers confirmed everything. The woman by the burritos cried through most of her statement but managed to describe exactly what she'd seen. And through it all, Evelyn stood near the patrol car, answering questions with the calm precision of someone who'd given operational debriefs in a dozen countries and knew exactly how much information to provide and when. But something else was happening, something the deputies didn't know yet, something Evelyn had started to suspect the moment Ray pulled that Glock. This wasn't random. This wasn't just two guys looking for a quick score at a gas station off Route 19. The timing was too specific, the location too deliberate, and the way Derek had looked at her when she walked in, not with surprise but with recognition like he'd been waiting. She'd learned to trust her instincts, and her instincts said this was a setup. Someone had wanted her here. Someone had known she'd stop for water at this exact station on her way back from the range. Someone had put Ray and Derek in position. But why? Webb's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, frowned, answered. Deputy Webb, his expression shifted. Yes, sir, she's here giving a statement. Pause. Understood. I'll let her know. He hung up, turned to Evelyn. That was my sergeant. Says we're supposed to hold you for a federal agent. Federal? Evelyn's eyes narrowed. FBI. Didn't say, just said someone's en route. Should be here in 20 minutes. And that's when she knew. This wasn't about a gas station robbery. This was about something bigger. Something that started before Ray pulled his gun. Something that involved her name, her service record, and the kind of people who don't just retire from the teams. They become targets because of what they know and what they've done. Derek must have known too, because when Webb mentioned federal agents, his face went pale, not from fear of arrest, from fear of exposure, from the realization that he and Ray weren't just small-time criminals anymore. They were part of something larger, something that would bring down people way above their pay grade. Commander, Webb said, using her old rank without thinking, you know what this is about. She looked at him, considered how much to say, decided on honesty. I have a suspicion, but I won't know until your federal agent arrives. And if you're right. Then Derek and Ray just became very interesting to a lot of very serious people. Derek's eyes widened. Wait, what? We didn't. This was just supposed to be a setup, Evelyn finished. You were sent here, someone paid you, someone gave you my schedule, someone told you where I'd be and when. Derek's silence was all the confirmation she needed. Ray looked up for the first time since being cuffed. We don't know anything. We just got a text. Said there'd be $5,000 if we pulled a gun on some woman at a gas station. That's it. We didn't know she was military. We didn't know anything else. Who sent the text? Reeves demanded. Unknown number, encrypted app. We got half the money up front, supposed to get the rest after. Evelyn's jaw tightened. And you didn't think that was suspicious? That someone would pay $10,000 just to scare a woman at a gas station? We thought, Ray faltered. We thought maybe she was someone's ex-wife or something, someone who wanted her scared. We weren't supposed to hurt her, Just put a gun to her face, Evelyn said, her voice flat. Just threaten her life. Just commit felony assault. Just become accessories to whatever plan someone else had. The weight of it settled over the parking lot. The realization that this wasn't over, that the two men on the ground weren't masterminds, they were pawns. And somewhere out there, someone had moved them into position on a chessboard Evelyn was only beginning to see. Headlights appeared on Route 19A black SUV. No plates visible, tinted windows. It pulled into the parking lot with the quiet authority of federal law enforcement. The door opened. A man stepped out, mid-40s, gray suit, FBI credentials already in hand. Special Agent Robert Brennan, Counterterrorism Division, and the look on his face said this was going to be a very long night. He walked straight to Evelyn, Commander Thorne. Just Evelyn now. Not according to the people trying to kill you. When does a robbery become an assassination attempt? When you realize the gun was never about money. Special Agent Brennan didn't waste time. He flashed his credentials to Webb, gave Reeves a curt nod, then turned to Evelyn with the kind of intensity that said he'd been working this case for longer than tonight, and every second mattered. We need to talk privately. About what? Evelyn asked, though she already knew. About Marcus Blackwood, about Greystone Solutions, and about why you're number 4 on a list of 11 retired DEVGRU operators someone's been trying to eliminate for the past 6 weeks. The parking lot went quiet. Even the deputies stopped moving, because those weren't just words, they were a detonation. The kind that turns a routine arrest into something that makes headlines and ends careers and puts people in witness protection. Evelyn's expression didn't change, but inside pieces clicked into place. Blackwood, she knew that name, former CIA contractor, disgraced after an operation in Yemen went sideways and 3 civilians died. He'd blamed the SEALs on the ground, said they'd compromised operational security, said they'd ignored his intel. The inquiry cleared the team. Blackwood lost his contract, lost his clearance, and apparently hadn't let it go. How many dead? She asked. 2 confirmed. Commander James Mitchell survived an explosion in his garage. Lieutenant Sarah Chen is in protective custody after someone tried to run her off I-95. You're lucky. You're the first one who actually got eyes on the attempt. They weren't trying to kill me, Evelyn said, her mind already working through the angles. They wanted me scared, destabilized. The gun to the face was theater. If they wanted me dead, they'd have pulled the trigger immediately. Brennan nodded. Psychological warfare, Blackwood's specialty. Break the target mentally before eliminating them physically. Makes it look like suicide or accident when it finally happens. Derek and Ray were loaded into separate patrol cars now, their faces pressed against the windows, watching this conversation with the growing horror of realizing they'd just become federal witnesses in a counterterrorism investigation. I need you to come with me, Brennan said. Safe house, debrief, full protection detail until we shut this down. Evelyn looked at him. At the SUV, at the deputies, at the gas station where 30 minutes ago she just wanted a bottle of water and instead walked into an ambush she'd somehow seen coming without knowing why. "No," she said. Brennan blinked. "Excuse me." I said no. I'm not going into protective custody. I'm not hiding. And I'm sure as hell not letting Blackwood think he scared me. "Commander, this isn't about pride. 3 people are dead. You're on the list. He will try again." "I know, and next time I'll be ready." "You were lucky tonight. You won't be lucky twice." Evelyn's eyes hardened. Luck didn't disarm Ray. Training did. Luck didn't read Derek's body language. Experience did. And luck sure as hell didn't give me 13 years of knowing when I'm being played. "So what do you want to do? Go home, wait for the next attempt, hope you're faster than a bullet?" "No," she said quietly. "I want you to tell me everything you know about Blackwood's operation, his patterns, his methods, his network, and then I want to help you find him before he gets to number 5. Brennan stared at her. "You're retired." "I'm trained. There's a difference. You're a civilian now. No authority, no jurisdiction, no backup. I have something better. I have 13 years of being exactly the person Blackwood thinks he can eliminate. And I know how men like him operate. They're arrogant. They underestimate. And they always leave patterns." Silence stretched. Brennan's jaw worked. He was calculating, weighing risk versus reward, weighing protocol versus practicality, weighing the rule book versus the reality that sometimes the rule book gets people killed. Finally, he spoke. "You help with the investigation, consultant basis. You follow my lead, you don't go rogue. And the second I think you're compromised, you're in protective custody, non-negotiable." "Deal." He pulled out his phone, made 2 calls. The first secured the scene with forensics. The second authorized her temporary consultant status with FBI counterterrorism. Then he opened the passenger door of the SUV. "Get in, we have a lot to cover and not much time." Evelyn climbed in. The door shut. The SUV pulled out of the parking lot, leaving behind the deputies, the patrol cars, and the gas station that would never look the same to anyone who'd been there tonight. Inside the vehicle, Brennan opened a laptop, pulled up files. Marcus Blackwood, 53 years old, former Marine, 20 years CIA Special Activities, specialized in psychological operations and targeted influence campaigns, discharged 4 years ago after the Yemen incident. You know about that. "I was on the team he blamed. We did everything right. He fed us bad intel. Civilians died because of his incompetence, not ours." The inquiry agreed, but Blackwood didn't. He started Greystone Solutions 6 months after discharge, private military contractor, bodyguards, security assessments, threat analysis, legitimate on the surface. But we've been watching him. His client list includes 3 shell corporations with ties to foreign intelligence services. So he's selling secrets. More than that, he's selling targets, retired operators who know things, who could testify, who could compromise ongoing operations if they went public. Evelyn's hands tightened. "He's making a list and checking it twice, except instead of coal, we get bullets." "Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. We think someone hired him, someone with resources, someone who wants these 11 operators gone before they can talk about something they saw or did during active service." "What did we see?" "That's the question. We've been cross-referencing your deployment histories, looking for overlap, trying to find the common thread. And you all deployed to Syria between 2019 and 2021. Different teams, different timelines, but the same operational area. And during that window, there was a black site interrogation facility that officially doesn't exist." The pieces clicked. Evelyn remembered. The compound outside Raqqa, the prisoners who weren't in any database, the contractors who asked questions the military wasn't authorized to ask, The orders that came from somewhere above their pay grade and disappeared into classified folders they'd never see again. We all rotated through security on that site, she said slowly. Yes, and 2 months ago, one of the detainees from that facility was released. A Saudi national with connections to people in very high places. People who might be willing to pay a lot of money to make sure anyone who saw him at that site never talks about it. So Blackwood gets paid to eliminate witnesses, make it look like accidents or suicides, keep it quiet, keep it clean. Until you broke the pattern. Until you survived in a way that's going to make headlines. Until Derek and Ray gave us their phones with text messages that trace back to encrypted servers we can now subpoena. Evelyn leaned back against the seat. You're going to use me as bait. I'm going to use tonight as leverage. Blackwood doesn't know we're onto him yet. He thinks this was just another failed attempt. But if we play it right, we can make him desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. What do you need from me? Everything you remember about that facility, every face, every contractor, every prisoner, every conversation you overheard that didn't sit right. She closed her eyes, let the memories surface. The ones she'd pushed down because orders were orders and questions got you nowhere except reassigned. The compound, the late-night movements, the trucks that arrived with no manifests, the screams that weren't supposed to exist because officially no one was there. I remember, she said quietly. I remember all of it. Good, because we're about to turn this from a manhunt into a reckoning. The SUV drove through the Virginia night, carrying a retired SEAL who just realized her last 18 months of civilian life were about to collide with the 13 years before it. And somewhere out there, Marcus Blackwood was getting a call that his latest attempt had failed. That the woman at the gas station wasn't just a target. She was a problem. And problems, he was about to learn, have a way of solving themselves when you underestimate who you're dealing with. What happens when the hunter realizes the prey has teeth? The FBI field office in Norfolk was exactly what Evelyn expected. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, the kind of space designed for efficiency, not comfort. Brennan led her through security, past cubicles filled with agents staring at monitors, up a stairwell to the third floor. Conference room 3B, he swiped his badge, pushed open the door. Inside, a wall of evidence, photos, timelines, red string connecting faces to locations to dates. At the center, 11 photographs, retired operators, 5 with red X's marked across them, 2 circled in yellow, 4 still unmarked. Evelyn's photo was third from the left, no X not yet. Welcome to Operation Nightfall, Brennan said, closing the door behind them. She studied the board. Who are the 5 X's? Dead, Commander Thomas Reed, car accident outside San Diego. Lieutenant Marcus Hayes, house fire in Jacksonville. Captain Jennifer Moss, hiking accident in Colorado. Lieutenant David Park, overdose in Seattle. And Commander Lisa Chen, mugging gone wrong in D.C. All within 6 weeks. All ruled accidental or coincidental by local PD. But you knew better. We suspected, but suspicion isn't evidence. Until tonight, until Derek and Ray gave us the connection we needed. Who are the 2 circled in yellow? Protected, Commander James Mitchell and Lieutenant Sarah Chen, both in safe houses, both cooperating, both gave statements about the Syria facility. And the other 4? You and 3 others we haven't located yet. Either they went dark on their own, or Blackwood got to them before we could. Evelyn stepped closer to the board, studied the faces. She knew 2 of them, had served with one, had trained with another. Good people, quiet professionals, the kind who did their jobs and went home and didn't talk about what they'd seen because that's what the security clearance meant. What did Mitchell and Chen remember about the facility? Brennan pulled up a laptop, opened files. Mitchell said there was a detainee who didn't fit the pattern, Saudi national, mid-40s, expensive clothes, spoke perfect English, never interrogated with the others, always kept separate. He remembered because one night a convoy arrived. Civilian vehicles, no military escort. 3 men in suits took the Saudi and left. No paperwork, no log entry, just gone. And Chen, she was on perimeter security, said she saw the same convoy, but she also saw something else. One of the men in suits was American, someone she recognized from a briefing 6 months earlier, a State Department official. Name: Harrison Vaught, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Near Eastern Affairs. Evelyn's breath caught. Vaught's in the State Department. Why would he be at a black site interrogation facility in Syria? That's the question, and it's the question that's getting people killed. She turned from the board. You think Vaught hired Blackwood? We think Vaught is protecting someone. Someone who was at that facility. Someone who can't afford to have witnesses talking about seeing a Saudi national being extracted by U.S. diplomatic personnel from a site that officially doesn't exist. Who was the Saudi? That's where it gets complicated. His name is Khalid al-Rashid, son of a Saudi oil minister, brother-in-law to a member of the royal family, and according to intelligence chatter, he was being held because he had information about a terror financing network that ran through D.C. lobbyists. So the U.S. grabbed him, held him illegally, then released him to protect someone on our side who was dirty. That's the theory, but proving it means finding people who saw it, people like you. And Vaught can't have that, so he hires Blackwood to eliminate witnesses, make it quiet, make it clean. Exactly. Evelyn's hands clenched. How high does this go? We don't know, but Vaught has connections. Senate committees, intelligence oversight, people who could bury an investigation before it starts. So you're running this off-book? Brennan nodded. Officially, this is a counterterrorism investigation into Greystone Solutions. Unofficially, it's about finding out who in our government is willing to kill American service members to cover their ass. What do you need from me? Everything you remember, and then I need you to help me set a trap. She looked at him, bait. Yes. You want Blackwood to come after me again. I want him to think he has a chance. I want him to make a move. And when he does, I want to be there to grab him and everyone he's working with. You're asking me to paint a target on my back. I'm asking you to do what you've always done. Stand in the gap. Protect the people behind you. Except this time, the people behind you are the ones still on this list. Evelyn turned back to the board, studied the faces. The 5 X's, the 2 in yellow, the 4 unmarked. Good people, people who'd served. People who'd earned the right to retire in peace. People who didn't deserve to die, because they'd seen something they weren't supposed to see. What's the trap? Brennan pulled up a different file. We leaked that you're cooperating with the FBI, that you gave a statement about Syria, that you're scheduled to testify before a closed congressional hearing in 2 weeks. And Blackwood panics. And Blackwood moves. He can't afford to let you testify. He'll escalate, come at you hard and fast. And you'll be waiting. With surveillance, tactical teams, everything we need to grab him and roll up his network. What about Vaught? If we get Blackwood, we get his communications, his client list, his financial records, everything we need to connect him to Vaught and whoever else is involved. Evelyn studied the board, the faces, the red X's, the quiet professionals who died thinking they were safe because they'd served their country and earned their rest. When do we start? Now we put you in a hotel downtown. Visible, accessible, you go to coffee shops, restaurants, the gym, you live your life like you're not worried, like you don't know someone's coming. And when they come, you do what you did tonight, you survive, and we close the net. She met his eyes. People might get hurt, bystanders, civilians who don't know they're walking into a trap. I know, that's why we'll have teams in plain clothes. That's why we'll monitor every move. That's why we won't let it get out of hand. You can't promise that. No, I can't. But I can promise that if we don't do this, 4 more operators die, and the people responsible walk away clean. Silence settled over the conference room. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere down the hall, a printer buzzed, and Evelyn made the choice she'd made 1,000 times before in 100 different rooms with different stakes but the same question. Do you stand or do you walk away? I'll do it, she said, but on one condition. What? When this is over, when Blackwood's in custody and Vaught's exposed, you make sure the families of the 5 who died know the truth. You tell them their loved ones didn't die in accidents. You tell them they died protecting a secret someone else wanted buried. You give them that much. Brennan nodded. You have my word. Then let's end this. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is look like you're not afraid. The hotel was downtown, Hampton Inn, 12 stories, parking garage beneath. Evelyn's room was on the 8th floor, corner unit, windows facing the street and the side alley, good sight lines, multiple exits, the kind of tactical setup that felt deliberate because it was. Brennan's teams were already in position. 2 agents in the room across the hall, disguised as a married couple. 3 more in a surveillance van parked 2 blocks south. Sniper team on the roof of the adjacent building. And a tactical response unit staged at the federal building 6 minutes away. All of it invisible, all of it waiting. Evelyn unpacked her go bag, change of clothes, toiletries. The SIG P229 she'd carried for 6 years during active duty and kept after retirement because some habits die hard. She checked the chamber, verified the mag, set it on the nightstand. Then she sat on the bed and let the weight of it settle. This was different from deployments, different from operations where everyone around you wore a uniform and understood the mission. This was civilian life crossed with the kind of danger that wasn't supposed to exist stateside. The kind that came from people in suits making decisions that got people in boots killed. Her phone buzzed, text from Brennan, you good? She typed back, ready. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, remember you're not alone, we're watching. She didn't respond, because being watched and being protected were different things. And the truth was, if Blackwood sent someone competent, someone trained, someone who knew what they were doing, the response time wouldn't matter. The 6 minutes it took for tactical to arrive would be 5 minutes and 50 seconds too late. But that's what made her useful. She didn't need 6 minutes. She needed 6 seconds. And 6 seconds was muscle memory and training and the kind of certainty that came from surviving situations where hesitation meant death. The next morning she went through the routine Brennan had planned. Coffee shop 2 blocks north at 800. Starbucks. Order at the counter, sit by the window, work on a laptop that had nothing on it except decoy files and a tracking program. Stay visible. Act natural. Let anyone watching see that she wasn't hiding. She walked in, ordered black coffee, sat at the window table. The place was half full. College students hunched over textbooks. A businessman on a phone call. A mother with 2 kids negotiating over croissants. Normal, safe. Except Evelyn knew that 2 of the people in the coffee shop weren't customers. One was Agent Riley, reading a newspaper near the back. The other was Agent Santos, in line for a second time, earpiece hidden beneath her hair. Evelyn opened the laptop, typed nothing, just sat there, visible, waiting. An hour passed, nothing. She left the coffee shop, walked 3 blocks to a park, sat on a bench. Same routine, same visibility, same silence. Brennan's voice in her earpiece. Anything. Quiet. Good, stay loose. This might take days. But it didn't. Because that night, at 2100 hours, when Evelyn returned to the hotel and stepped into the elevator, she noticed something. A man in a maintenance uniform, tool belt, work boots, heading toward the stairwell on the 8th floor just as the elevator doors closed. She'd seen enough maintenance crews in enough buildings to know what belonged and what didn't. And the way he moved, too balanced, too aware, eyes tracking her reflection in the elevator mirror, said he wasn't there to fix the ice machine. She pressed the button for the 7th floor, got out one level early, took the stairs, moved quietly listening for footsteps above, heard them, slow, deliberate, heading to the 8th floor. She pulled the cig from her jacket pocket, chambered around, kept moving, reached the 8th floor landing, pushed the door open a crack. The man in the maintenance uniform was at her door, not knocking, not working, just standing there with one hand inside his tool belt, the other holding something small and rectangular, electronic lock bypass, the kind that costs 5 figures and isn't available to people who fix elevators. Evelyn stepped into the hallway, looking for something. He turned, saw her, saw the gun, and made his choice in the half-second between recognition and reaction. He pulled a suppressed Glock from the tool belt, raised it, fired. The suppressor turned the gunshot into a metallic cough. The round punched through the drywall 2 inches from Evelyn's shoulder. She was already moving, diving left, returning fire. Her round caught him in the thigh. He stumbled, dropped, tried to bring the gun back up. She closed the distance, kicked the Glock from his hand, put her knee into his chest and the cig to his temple. "Who sent you?" He didn't answer, just stared at her with the kind of defiance that said he knew the rules, knew what talking meant, knew what silence bought. The door across the hall burst open. Agents Riley and Martinez, weapons drawn, badges out. "FBI, don't move." Evelyn didn't, just kept the pressure on. "He's armed, suppressed Glock, tried to breach my room." Martinez secured the weapon. Riley cuffed the man, and Brennan's voice came through the earpiece. "Evelyn, you good?" "Fine, we have one in custody." "Tacticals en route, secure the floor." But Evelyn was already looking at the man's face, studying him, and something clicked. "I know you," she said quietly. "You were at the facility, Syria, 2020, you were with the contractors." His expression shifted, just for a second. Recognition mixed with the realization that he just confirmed what she'd suspected. "You worked for Blackwood even then," she continued. "You were part of the security detail. You saw the convoy. You saw Vaught." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. And so does the FBI. And in about 5 minutes, you're going to be in an interrogation room with federal prosecutors who don't care about your loyalty or your paycheck. They care about conspiracy to commit murder, and you just tried to kill a federal witness." His jaw tightened. "I want a lawyer." "Smart, you're going to need one." Tactical arrived, secured the floor, evicted the other guests, turned the hotel into a crime scene, and while they processed everything, Brennan pulled Evelyn into a stairwell. "You all right?" "I'm fine, but he's not just a hired gun. He's connected. He was at the Syria facility. He's one of Blackwood's people from the beginning." "Then we leverage him, use him to roll up the network." "He won't talk." "Everyone talks eventually." "Not if they're more afraid of Blackwood than they are of prison." Brennan's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, cursed. "We just got a hit on surveillance. 2 more vehicles inbound. Greystone contractor plates. They're coming for him." "Or for me." "Either way, we're about to get company." Evelyn checked her cig. "How long?" 4 minutes. "Tactical." 3 minutes out. She smiled, cold, certain. "Then I guess we buy them 60 seconds. And for the first time since this started, Brennan saw what Derek and Ray had seen in that gas station. What every threat she'd ever faced had seen right before they realized their mistake. The quiet certainty of someone who didn't need backup, because backup was a luxury, not a necessity. The woman who'd learned 13 years ago that the only person you could count on when everything went sideways was yourself. And sometimes that was enough. In the end, it's not about who speaks loudest. It's about who's still standing when the noise stops. The tactical team arrived in two black Suburbans. No lights, no sirens, just the quiet efficiency of professionals who'd done this 100 times. They spread out across the hotel perimeter, 2 on the roof, 4 in the lobby, 3 covering the parking garage. Agent Brennan coordinated from the command van parked half a block south, watching multiple feeds, listening to radio chatter, waiting for the moment everything either went clean or went sideways. Evelyn stood in the 8th-floor hallway, cig in hand, watching the elevator indicator lights. The man in the maintenance uniform, now identified as Curtis Hall, former Army Ranger, current Greystone Solutions contractor, sat cuffed on the floor, blood seeping through the makeshift pressure bandage on his thigh. "They're not coming for you," Hall said, his voice tight with pain. "They're coming to finish what you interrupted." "They can try," Evelyn said without looking at him. "You don't get it. Blackwood doesn't send amateurs. He sends people like me, people who know what they're doing." Then he should have sent more. The elevator dinged, 7th floor moving up. Evelyn's grip tightened on the cig. Brennan's voice came through her earpiece. 2 hostiles confirmed in the lobby, armed, moving toward the elevators. Tactical is in position but holding for your signal. "Copy," she said quietly. The elevator reached 8, stopped. The doors slid open. 2 men stepped out, both in suits, both with the kind of posture that said military training refined by private sector work, both scanning the hallway with practiced efficiency until they saw Evelyn standing there with a gun pointed at them and Hall on the floor bleeding. The taller one's hand moved toward his jacket. "Don't," Evelyn said, one word, calm, certain. He froze. "FBI." Agents Riley and Martinez burst from the stairwell, weapons raised, badges out. On the ground now. The 2 men looked at each other, calculating, weighing options, deciding whether this was worth dying for. They chose life, went to their knees, hands behind their heads. Within 30 seconds, Tactical had them cuffed and cleared. Within 2 minutes, the 8th floor was secure. And within 5, all 3 Greystone contractors were in the back of federal transport vehicles heading to the Norfolk field office. Brennan met Evelyn in the hotel lobby. That was textbook. "That was lucky," she corrected. "They didn't know we had Tactical staged." "Lucky or not, we just captured 3 of Blackwood's operators. That's leverage. That's testimony. That's the beginning of the end. Or the beginning of something worse. Blackwood knows now. He knows we're waiting. He knows I'm protected. He'll change tactics. Let him, we have his people. We'll flip one. Get the network, shut him down before he can adapt." But Evelyn's instincts said otherwise. Said that men like Blackwood didn't panic. They pivoted. They found new angles. They escalated in ways that made the previous attempts look tame. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something told her to. She swiped, "Hello." "Commander Thorne." The voice was smooth, confident, the voice of someone used to being listened to. "My name is Marcus Blackwood. I think it's time we talked." Evelyn's expression didn't change, but Brennan saw it. Saw the way her jaw set. Saw the way her free hand clenched. He mouthed, "Put it on speaker." She did. "Mr. Blackwood, I was wondering when you'd call." "Were you? I'm flattered. Though I have to admit, you've been more trouble than anticipated. Most of my targets don't disarm armed assailants at gas stations or capture my contractors in hotel hallways. Most of your targets weren't Navy SEALs." "Fair point, which brings me to why I'm calling. I'd like to propose a meeting, you and me. No FBI, no tactical teams, just a conversation between professionals." "Why would I do that?" "Because I have information you want. About who hired me. About how high this goes. About names and dates and details that will make your federal friends very uncomfortable when they realize how deep the corruption runs. And in exchange? In exchange, you walk away. Stop cooperating. Stop testifying. Let this fade into the background where it belongs. And the 4 operators still on your list. They become my problem, not yours. Evelyn looked at Brennan. He shook his head emphatically. No, trap, don't engage. She ignored him. Where and when? Tomorrow, noon. The salvage yard off Route 460. You know the one. Bring yourself. Bring your gun. Don't bring the FBI or everyone dies. How do I know you'll be alone? You don't, but you're a SEAL. You're trained for ambushes. And frankly, Commander, I think you're curious. I think you want to look me in the eyes and understand why I'm doing this. Because people like us don't operate on orders alone. We operate on principle. And you want to know what principle justifies hunting the people who kept this country safe. The line went dead. Brennan exploded. Absolutely not. No way. That's a kill box. He'll have shooters positioned, explosives rigged, every advantage. You walk into that yard and you're not walking out. Maybe, Evelyn said quietly, or maybe he's telling the truth. Maybe he does want to talk. And maybe Santa Claus is real. Evelyn, this is suicide. This is an opportunity. He's getting desperate, making mistakes, reaching out directly instead of sending contractors. That's not tactical, that's emotional. All the more reason not to go. All the more reason to end this now. If I can get him talking, get him to admit who hired him, we record it, use it as evidence, flip the entire investigation. Or you die and this whole thing collapses. She looked at him. You said you needed someone who understood how men like Blackwood operate, someone who could draw him out. This is him drawn out. This is the moment we've been setting up. Not like this, not without backup. Then give me backup. Position tactical outside the perimeter, drones overhead, every surveillance asset you have. But let me walk in alone. Let me make him think he's one. Brennan stared at her. You're serious. I'm trained, and I'm the only shot we have at getting him on record admitting everything. Silence stretched. Brennan's phone buzzed. He looked at it, curse it again. Curtis Hall just lawyered up. Won't say a word without a deal. The other 2 contractors are doing the same. We have nothing. Then this is it. This is our play. Brennan ran his hand through his hair. If I authorize this and it goes wrong, then it's on me, not you. That's not how it works. That's exactly how it works. I'm not active duty. I'm a consultant. I make my own choices. He looked at her for a long moment, seeing past the retired SEAL standing in a hotel lobby, seeing the 13 years of combat operations and 6 deployments, and the kind of certainty that came from making life-or-death decisions in seconds and living with the consequences. Finally, he nodded. We do this my way. You wear a wire. We have tactical staged within 200 meters, drones with thermal imaging, sniper overwatch. And the second it goes sideways, we extract you whether you like it or not. Agreed. And Evelyn, if he kills you, I'm going to feel really bad about it. She almost smiled, noted. The next 12 hours passed in preparation, tactical briefings, route planning, equipment checks. Brennan's team mapped the salvage yard, 40 acres of rusted cars and industrial equipment, perfect for ambushes, terrible for extraction. They identified 3 sniper positions, 2 drone flight paths, and 4 tactical entry points. At 11:45 the next morning, Evelyn climbed into an unmarked sedan. No FBI escort, no visible backup. Just her, the SIG P229, and a wire transmitter hidden in her jacket collar. She drove east on Route 460, watching the rearview mirror for tails, seeing none. Either Blackwood was confident enough not to surveil her, or his people were good enough that she couldn't spot them. Either way, she was committed. The salvage yard appeared at 11:57, rusted gate hanging open, gravel drive disappearing into rows of stacked cars. No visible security, no cameras, just decades of automotive graveyard and the smell of motor oil and decay. She pulled in, parked near the entrance, stepped out. The silence was absolute. No birds, no traffic from the highway, just wind moving through broken windows and the distant creak of metal settling. "I'm in position," she said quietly, knowing Brennan was listening. "No visuals on Blackwood." Brennan's voice in her earpiece. "Drones are overhead. Thermal shows one heat signature 200 meters northeast, second floor of the main office building. That's your target." Evelyn started walking, gravel crunching beneath her boots, hand resting near the SIG, eyes scanning, every sense alert. The office building was a two-story concrete shell, windows shattered, door hanging off its hinges. She stepped inside. The interior smelled like mold and rust. Stairs to her right, sagging but intact. She climbed, each step deliberate, gun drawn now, finger along the frame, not in the trigger guard, not yet. The second floor opened into what had once been administrative offices. Empty desks, overturned filing cabinets, and at the far window, silhouetted against the daylight, a man. Marcus Blackwood, 53 years old, gray hair cropped military short, shoulders that carried decades of conditioning, and eyes that watched her approach with the kind of evaluation that said he was still deciding whether this ended in conversation or violence. "Commander Thorne," he said without turning, "you came alone. You said to. And you listened to orders from men you don't know. Interesting. I listen to opportunities when they present themselves." He turned now and she saw it. The Beretta M9 holstered on his hip. The relaxed posture of someone who knew he had the advantage. The faint smile of someone who'd already won. "You know why I do this," he said. "You understand because you were there. You saw what our government does, what secrets it keeps, what lies it tells. I saw a black site facility. I saw detention without trial. I saw things I didn't agree with, but I didn't kill anyone over it. Because you still believe the system works, that justice prevails, that good people doing good things eventually win." His voice hardened. "You're wrong. The system protects itself, always has, always will, and people like us, people who serve it faithfully, we're disposable. The second we become liabilities, they erase us. So you erase them first. I do what I'm paid to do." "And who's paying you, Marcus? Who hired you to kill American service members?" He smiled. "You want names, want leverage, want to build a case and take down the people responsible. But here's what you don't understand, Commander. There is no taking them down. They're untouchable. Senators, cabinet members, people who make the laws and break them without consequences." Harrison Vaught. His smile faded. "So you know." "I know he was at the facility. I know he extracted Khalid al-Rashid. I know al-Rashid had information that could expose corruption in D.C., and I know Vaught can't afford witnesses." "Very good. The FBI taught you well." "The FBI didn't teach me anything. I've been trained to read people since I was 23 years old, and you're stalling." "Stalling? Waiting for something or someone." His expression flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. And that's when she heard it. Footsteps, multiple coming up the stairs, contractors, more of Blackwood's people. She'd walked into exactly what Brennan said, a kill box. But she didn't panic, didn't freeze, just stood there, gun still in hand, watching Blackwood watch her. "Last chance," she said quietly. "Call them off, surrender, testify, save yourself." He shook his head. "You still don't get it. I'm not saving myself. I'm protecting the principle that some secrets are worth dying for." "Wrong," she said. "You're protecting a paycheck." And then everything went sideways. The contractors burst through the door, weapons raised. Evelyn Dove left behind a desk, returning fire. Rounds punched through drywall, glass shattered. Blackwood drew his Beretta, and Brennan's voice exploded in her earpiece. "Tactical moving in, hold position." But holding wasn't an option. Not with 4 armed contractors and Blackwood between her and the exit. not with gunfire echoing through the salvage yard, and the certainty that this was about to become exactly what she'd feared. A firefight with her in the middle. She rolled right, came up firing, dropped one contractor with a double tap to center mass, the others scattered. Blackwood moved toward the stairs. She tracked him, fired, missed. He disappeared into the stairwell. Tactical breached the lower floor, flashbangs detonating, shouted commands, the controlled chaos of federal agents executing a raid. But the remaining contractors weren't surrendering. They were fighting, and the building was turning into a war zone. Evelyn ran for the stairs, cleared the corner, saw Blackwood halfway down, turning, raising the Beretta. Time slowed, the way it always did in moments like this. She saw his finger on the trigger, saw the barrel align, saw the decision in his eyes. She fired first, one round, center mass. He staggered, dropped. The Beretta clattered down the stairs. She reached him in 3 steps, kicked the weapon away, knelt beside him. "You were wrong," she said quietly. "Secrets aren't worth dying for, people are." He coughed, blood on his lips. "You think this ends me, they'll find someone else, they always do." "Maybe, but you won't be around to see it." Tactical swarmed the building. Medics rushed in. Brennan appeared at the top of the stairs, face pale, eyes wide. "Evelyn." "I'm fine," she said, standing. "He's not." They stabilized Blackwood, cuffed him, loaded him into an ambulance. The other contractors were either dead or in custody, and by the time the sun set, the salvage yard was a federal crime scene that would take weeks to process. But it was over. The network was broken. The contractors were in custody, and Blackwood, assuming he survived, would face charges that would keep him in prison for the rest of his life. 2 weeks later, Evelyn sat in a closed congressional hearing and told everything she knew about the Syria facility, about Harrison Vaught, about Khalid al-Rashid, about the convoy that arrived in the night and the secrets someone decided were worth killing for. Vaught resigned 3 days later, citing personal reasons. The investigation continued, quietly, the way these things always do when people with power are involved. But the 4 operators still on Blackwood's list, they were safe now, protected, alive. And the families of the 5 who died, Brennan kept his promise, told them the truth, gave them closure, gave them the knowledge that their loved ones hadn't died for nothing. Evelyn returned to Virginia Beach, to her civilian life, to the quiet routine of someone who'd served and retired and earned the right to rest. But rest, she'd learned, was a state of mind, not a location. Because 2 weeks after the congressional hearing, she found herself back at the gas station on Route 19A, same time. Same tired sodium lights, same Ken behind the counter. She walked in, ordered water, paid with exact change. And as she turned to leave, the door opened. A young woman stepped in, nervous, anxious, looking over her shoulder. 2 men followed, too close, too aggressive. Evelyn set her water bottle down on the counter. Ken looked up, recognition flickering into something close to relief. And she turned to face the 2 men with the same quiet certainty she'd carried through 13 years of service and 18 months of retirement. Because that's what the trident meant, not that you were a weapon, that you were a guardian. And guardians didn't retire. They just kept showing up, kept standing between threat and victim, kept making the choice that some people were worth protecting. And silence. Silence was the deadliest weapon when it came from someone who didn't need words to be heard. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.